That was what I wanted to finish with is there's a lack of diversity of coaching in the NFL. And I know that's a topic you're passionate about.
Yes.
Is it hopeful? Do you think that there are some strong candidates that could get a spot in the NFL this season, or do you think it's a long ways away?
There's a ton of strong candidates. There's always been a ton of strong candidates. And all
Mm.
the stuff about not having people in the pipeline is the biggest crock that ownership and people push. I mean, oh, okay, so he's a defensive head coach. Well, defensive head coaches can't win. Bill Belichick's a defensive head coach. Mike Tomlin's a defensive head coach. Now, you look at the Final Four, and you're like, well, okay, when push comes to shove, you got to get an offensive head coach who come from the Shanahan-McVay tree. But no, I mean, look, Eric Bieniemy, why? Jim Caldwell, Todd Bowles, Byron Leftwich, Raheem Morris. There's so many other talented people whose names aren't necessarily out there in forefront, or they aren't necessarily coordinators. Harold Godwin, who's also the assistant head coach, down with the Buccaneers. Thomas Brown, a rising star, who's a running backs coach for the Rams. He's 35 years old. You talk to this dude, and you're like, okay, like if he's a typical Sean McVay disciple, right? And it's kind of like, maybe if he was a white dude, he'd already be getting more than one head coaching interview. But because he's black dude and he's a running back coach, for whatever reason, he's only had one. But the fact he got one, I think, says something. So, again, I'm not buying this lack of candidates and this and that. There's a lot of good leaders, right? The reason why Sean McVay and the reason why Kyle Shanahan are great coaches is not just because they're offensive schemers and play callers. It's because they coach coaches to develop players and communicate. Again, you hear me talk about this connective tissue throughout their organization better than most coaches in the NFL. That's why they succeed. And that's why they're going to continue to develop coaches who succeed. And there are plenty of those types of candidates out there, regardless of their racial makeup. A lot of times, owners, they just want someone who looks good at the press conference or can coach one side of the ball really well, instead of somebody who can lead men with a short-term and long-term plan. And that's how come we keep on having 7 and 8 coaches fired every year, and they're pretty much the same owners looking to replace them every 3 years.
That was going to be my next question was, do you see a trend in it being the same teams following that suit where they're not?
It is. It is. It is. The Dolphins are always in the coaching search. The Giants are always in a coaching search. The Bears, it's the same teams. It is the same teams. You don't see Pittsburgh. You don't see New England, right? I mean, the Niners were in that cycle for a while, but they've found their guy. Yeah. It is the same to Houston. It is the same teams over and over, which tells you maybe it's not the coaching, maybe it's not the general managing, maybe it's the people making decisions on who they're hiring to lead their ball clubs, or maybe it's the environment of those clubs that's not giving those guys to necessarily win ball games.
Mm-hmm. And in your conversations with the coaching carousel that we're seeing, are you hopeful this season? Do you think that changes could be made right now?
No, I'm not. I mean, I'm not beaten down. I do look, and this is not an NFL league office issue, right? The league office issue is saying you have to interview multiple diverse candidates from outside of your building. Because remember, teams, they would just interview a black tight end coach and then go hire John Gruden. That's the sham that the Raiders pulled before they hired Gruden. So now the NFL is saying you have to hire people from outside of your building. So maybe you can find the next Mike Tomlin. Back when Tomlin was hired, okay, I'm old enough to remember this. It was Russ Grimm or Ken Whisenhunt. We're going to get that job. And all of a sudden, Mike Tomlin came in from the Vikings after 1 year being there at DC, and they were like, oh, my God, this guy's something else. We're going to hire him. So, some of the measures that the league have set up, besides the Rooney Rule, are really there so these people, these coaching firms, these search firms and all this can find somebody who they deem proper to lead. But again, it's the same people making the same hires, which always aren't for the right reasons for long-term success. And which is why, look, you lost 2 black coaches. Now you have 1 black head coach and 1 Latino coach, Ron Rivera and Mike Tomlin. So you hire 2 black coaches, you're back to where you started. And so I just, is there going to be a net gain? I'm not optimistic. But, I don't think anyone's ever going to give up on this issue either, because at some point there's going to be changes in ownership. with more progressive thinkers like we've seen in NBA ownership that could start hiring people for the right reasons and by merit. Because a lot of times the big argument is, why are you hiring people for color? Shouldn't the best guy get the job? The best guy was getting the job. We wouldn't need a Rooney Rule. We wouldn't need to be talking about inclusion and diversity because there would be people of color in those jobs already.
Right.